'cause I love this land. It takes my breath away.
Welcome to Texas 10. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Steve. Together we're the Howans.
And we've been traveling the state of Texas for the last 5 years, visiting every county seat.
Well, we've been traveling the state of Texas for the last 60 years, but the last 5 we've had a real purpose.
Right. So we've been purposefully going to every county seat, but today we're going to my birthplace.
Well, San Antonio.
Yep.
And that is San Antonio is the county seat of Bexar County. San Antonio is a huge city population-wise, but it's also a really big city geographically. So it's San Antonio and the suburbs basically constitute Bexar County, but we're going to talk about San Antonio proper and a lot about downtown San Antonio.
Right. Many of you probably, if you've not been there, you've read about it. It is a real destination city. It has a flavor that is unique to any city in Texas. And, you know,
I'm going to one-up you. I'm going to say unique to any city in the United States, maybe any, not better than, but it is a unique destination in the world.
And I think sometimes we underestimate what's right in our backyard. So I love San Antonio. I was actually born in the Nix Hospital right down on the downtown river. It's not a hospital anymore, but they're turning it into condos. And I keep telling Steve, I'd like to live there.
Start there and end there, maybe. Who knows?
Anyway, but San Antonio is a great city. And I do think we start with the Riverwalk. It's what it's one of the things it's most known for. And the thing that's great about the Riverwalk, it's been there forever. I mean, I remember as a young kid back in the 60s, they had Hemisphere and what a big deal Hemisphere was. And then it's not become stagnant. I mean, they have expanded through the years and made it even better.
So yes, and it keeps expanding. Mm-hmm. San Antonio is a destination city, a lot of conventions, a lot of tourists come to see great weather, so you can come all during the year. And the Riverwalk is a mecca for that. And Melissa mentioned Hemisphere, which was a World's Fair type thing. 1968, it occurred. They built the Tower of Americas, which is an iconic landmark in San Antonio. Hemisphere, the area, and then it all gets connected to the Riverwalk.
Right.
And so you can walk up and down the Riverwalk, go to great restaurants, great bars, great restaurants, great bars. There's not a ton of retail on there, but there's great restaurants and great bars.
And in fact, if you, there is also La Villita, though, there on the river, which is the little town of La Villita, it does have some cool, like, craftsman shop. It's kind of an artisan locale, if you will. It's really great.
And so that's up on top. The Riverwalk actually is down from the street levels, the Riverwalk itself. And so just graze, just walk up and down, and you can ride up and down.
Yes, there are the barges. And I would say when you visit San Antonio, a lot of people tend to try to stay on the outskirts of cities. I always say start at the center and work your way out. So if you start at the river, and there are a lot of hotels on the river, and so you can actually find a very expensive, amazing hotel, or you can have a very one that's very cost effective. There's a range of hotels. We actually spent our wedding night on the Riverwalk. So
at the Hyatt.
Yes,
at
the Hyatt, yeah.
Yes.
But so there's a wide range of hotels. So if you start on the river, the first thing to do is take a river barge tour, because it will give you a flavor of the city. It tells you all about the history. I love the building that has the gargoyles on it and the stories about how he decided to what to sculpt on that building. And there's just story after story that the tour guides give on the river. And
so we're not going to repeat the tour guide story, but encourage you to do that. And you're going to get a lot of the history. And the reason the Riverwalk's still there, it was in danger at one time. It's actually the San Antonio River is what runs through there. So take the tour and go to eat and go to some of those great bars. So.
And there's also great museums. Oh, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, now when you talked about the expansion of the Riverwalk, it moves up to what's called the Pearl District. Mm-hmm. And the Pearl was, if you grew up in Texas when we did, you might have drank. I won't try and use the big
Pearl
words.
beer.
Pearl beer. And I'm going to go ahead and say Pearl was a great starter beer. That was... It wasn't very strong, but it was brewed right there in San Antonio. And the people that owned Pace Picante Sauce sold, and they had a lot of money after the sale. And they poured money into the Pearl District, and they have built and now with partners, just an amazing cultural area.
And it has my very favorite hotel that I have ever stayed in the world. It's the Emma. The Hotel
Emma. Now, when she said sometimes they're cost effective,
this one is not.
That ain't the Hotel Emma. But if you've saved your shekels for one spectacular night, the Hotel Emma is a great place. And if you're not staying there, you know what? They've got a great bar.
They have a great bar. And just walking through, it's very historic, and you can find out about the brewery. There's a book that's about Emma. It's actually fiction, but it's historical fiction. And so you can learn a little bit about that. But that area is also called the Museum Reach. And they've extended the river. So you can start down at the center and then go and walk. And you can also take barges through the Museum Reach and see several museums. And in the Pearl area.
Right. And so that's, if you eat, drink, relax, Pearl District, awesome.
So let's talk about museums for a minute.
Let's talk about museums.
My favorite museum is not the Bullock, that's in Austin.
You're going to say the Briscoe, I bet.
I am. It's a B, Briscoe. It's a Western art museum, and it's fairly small. But if you could only pick one art museum, that would be the one to go to. It has spectacular works of art, and it's right on the river.
It is. I love it. We're big fans of Western art, so that sort of skews our perspective a little. The McNay, the Whitty, they're great museums also, and they're a little bit farther out, but not far. But Briscoe, right downtown, it backs to the river itself. And there's a particular sculpture of three great Native American leaders that is right towards the outset of it. And I'm going to forget the name. I think it's John Coleman was the sculptor. Don't hold me to that. But it is maybe one of the most affecting pieces of art I have ever seen. And I learned about it that one of them never had their picture taken. And so what the sculptor did is that some of the descendants had their pictures taken, and he sort of built that particular Native American based on what his descendants looked like and sort of working backwards. But it's spectacular, as much of the art in the Briscoe is.
So the museums are great. And then, of course, in San Antonio, the missions. And so you talk about the Museum Reach. You can actually bike ride or run. There's a trail that goes from downtown through all the missions. And of course, you're going to want to start with the Alamo, which is amazing. And they're redoing that whole area, which is it's going to be all pedestrian. It's really very cool.
Right. So the Alamo, of course, is the definitive Texas landmark. And you can't go to San Antonio and not go to the Alamo. It's actually a law, I believe. So I encourage you to get up and get there early because there's a lot of people that show up.
Well, you can book tours early too. In advance.
Or you could stay at the Minger Hotel,
which is where our wedding reception was,
and where Teddy Roosevelt formed the Rough Riders.
Right. That's a little more historical than our wedding.
Right, they're sort of
wedding
equal.
Was great though.
Right, and it is right next door to the Alamo. So if you're really interested in exploring the Alamo in depth, the Minger might be a great place for you to stay. It's a historic building in its own right, but so get there early. And it used to be. I don't want to say disappointing, but it wasn't what people expected for such an iconic structure. And we're going to go more than 10 minutes.
You cannot do San Antonio in 10 minutes, kids. So bear with us here.
Right. So it was, but there's been a grand plan. They're redoing it. There's an artifact collection now that's super interesting.
Well, what's very interesting is who owns a lot of the artifacts. It's Phil Collins.
The drummer.
Yes.
The Genesis man. The Phil Collins man.
The musician.
Right, the musician Phil Collins. And so there's, that sort of, like in the United States, when somebody is really interested in English culture, we call them Anglophiles. And it's nice to know that it goes both ways because Phil is English and he's really interested in the Alamo. But it is, it is a standard for people that want liberty. And
right.
That's, it's inspiring. It's horrific what happened there, but it is inspiring the result of it.
But there's just so many tales, and to hear the story of Susanna getting her kids out. I mean, there's just the stories that you've heard when you study Texas history. So much of it centers around the Alamo. And
what Melissa started there with is that was just one of several missions in San Antonio. There's San Juan, there's El Capistrano, there's, I'm going to blank on
San Jose.
Mm-hmm. And they're all different architecture, all Spanish influenced, obviously, but they're different architecture. They serve different purposes. Many of them are still functioning Catholic churches, and it's a national park system, and they're fantastic.
Well, you can see the rose window, which is really beautiful, and there's a beautiful story behind that about the artist, and his love and his lost love, and building this or making this window. But you can go and you can still worship at them. And if you're a photographer, the missions are just beautiful subjects for photography.
Well, let's shout out to Bob Howen, who is the premier mission photographer that ever existed, in my humble opinion. And so we've long been, and we've had access to great images of the missions. They're historic and beautiful. And like Melissa said, now that they've got this mission reach, they're easily accessible with a long hike or a bike. The bikes can be electric, so it's...
we did that, and it was a lot of fun, actually.
Right. So
and,
that's
and you can drive. They're well marked. And so then if you move off the river and you go a little bit towards the market, the San Fernando Cathedral is one of my favorite cathedrals. And there's a couple of things. The heroes of the Alamo are actually entombed there. So that's very interesting. But they have this light show on, I think, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. And it kind of tells the history of San Antonio. And it's the most remarkable.
history of Texas.
It is remarkable. It is beautiful. So you can take a picnic dinner and watch.
Right. And so this is a world-class, I believe he's a French artist, and he has the ability to project these things. And San Fernando Cathedral is very ornate on the outside. It's a tremendously beautiful building. But then he projects it, and he's done it in sites all around the world. San Antonio is really lucky that they have had his thumbprint or fingerprint on it. And it's about 30 minutes long. Its music goes along with it. If you're out there on a Friday night and it's nice and it's great, the kids love it. If the kids if you don't have kids with you, then it's not far from the Esquire Bar, which is one of those great bars at the river. So it's a great little evening.
There's a lot of bars,
right? But I'm gonna pump the Esquire. That's the one to go to.
Yeah, and then there is Mi Tierras is not far from that, which is a marketplace, and we're learning as we do this podcast. Sometimes there's a place we love, and something happens, they may go out of business. Mi Tierras will never go out of business.
Never, ever go out of business.
It is open 364 days a year, and it's decorated for Christmas 364 days a year. And it really is good Mexican food, too.
So if you're going to San Antonio, you're going to eat Mexican food. Oh. Okay. And there's 200 great Mexican restaurants in San Antonio. 1,000. I know you can't miss if you're going to go eat Mexican food. But Mi Tierra is a great it's probably the most iconic representative of that cuisine in San Antonio.
And if you get the munchies for Mexican food at 2:00 in the morning, go to Mi Tierra's. I forgot to say.
That's changed.
What? It's not open 24 hours? It is not
open 24/7 anymore.
Oh, I'm so sorry, listeners. Right. I thought it used to be open 24 hours a day, 364 days a year. And there were after, proms or dances, you'd go to Mi Tierra's.
Right. No, it is no longer 24 hours.
Well, that's a real shame.
Right. But it is open late, and there are many that are open late. So get your Tex-Mex on in San Antonio. You won't go wrong in many places, but Mi Tierra is a sure bet.
And then where Mi Tierra's is, it's in the marketplace, and it's like being in a Mexican market. And so you'll really enjoy that as well.
Yep.
Some other things to mention when I think about the river, we talked about La Villita, the little town of La Villita, and San Antonio is known for a big festival called Fiesta. And they have 3 parades for Fiesta. They have the Battle of Flowers. They have the night parade, and I think they still do it. And then they have the river parade. And so San Antonio is so special and they also have these great river parades where they get the barges ready. So they have that during Fiesta. They also have a great Christmas parade on the river. So those are really great times to stay and be on the river and experience the culture of San Antonio.
So Fiesta is as close as you can get to Mardi Gras without it being Mardi Gras, but it celebrates Texas independence. It's built around April 21st, the Battle of San Jacinto, when we won Texas independence, and it's a wild party. Night in Old San Antonio and La Villita is a huge throwdown, and like Melissa said, the parades are great.
And it celebrates the Hispanic culture. Right. And that's another thing about San Antonio is it is such a celebration wherever you go of the Hispanic culture. Bright colors, everything you think of. And, in fact, one of the things I think about too is professional sports, and they have our favorite basketball team, the San Antonio Spurs. But when I'm thinking about that Mexican culture, their colors are bright, they're black and silver, but everywhere else it's all the bright colors, and they just really embrace the culture of San Antonio.
Well, San Antonio is, I don't know if it's exactly this anymore, but it was long recognized because it was the largest city that was minority majority, and it was mostly Hispanic. And it is, if you talk about a melting pot, it is definitely a melting pot city. I always felt blessed to grow up in San Antonio because race is an issue everywhere, but probably less so in San Antonio because of that and because of the military influence, which is one of our least segregated institutions in the United States. And San Antonio is a huge military town.
There's Fort Sam Houston, which has beautiful historic buildings. There's Randolph, which is an Air Force base. And there's Lackland, where every recruit that comes through the Air Force comes through Lackland Air Force Base for their
right. So if you're
training.
enlisted in the United States Air Force, you have spent time in San Antonio. And one of the things that I'm going to go back to is on the river, you will often see the young airmen and airwomen with their one stripe, right? And they have just graduated basic training, and they're out celebrating the end of basic training, which is a big thing to celebrate.
Yes.
And that always does my heart good to see them out there.
San Antonio really supports our armed forces, and I'm really proud to have been raised there and that be such a big part of my life.
100%.
So I'm going to wrap up. We may have to do another segment on San Antonio. I would tell you, like I said, start at the center and work your way out. There's other great things like SeaWorld and Fiesta, Texas. There's great resorts on the edge of town. There's universities. San Antonio is just rich. We didn't talk about King William's District. There's so much to do in San Antonio. Go to our website and so much more will be on it. Right. But what I will tell you is you will not be disappointed if you take a vacation. If you're looking for, different, exotic, if you will. I think San Antonio has that flavor.
Oh, it does. It's like I said, it's a world city for visiting. And did I mention it had great bars?
Yes, Steve.
Okay, all right.
You did. Yes, there's lots of food and dining and wining in San Antonio.
Right. Oh well.
Margarita-ing.
And we don't have time to talk about it, but I'm going to say one word, and you can research it. Southtown.
Amazing. Really changing.
Southtown.
So if you haven't been to San Antonio in 25 years, you've got to go back.
Right.
It's great.
And if you haven't been to San Antonio in 5 years or 5 months,
you should go back.
Right.
Let's go to San Antonio.
Let's go to San Antonio.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Keep joining us on Texas 10. As you can tell, we love San Antonio, Texas. We both were raised there, so it's near and dear to our hearts. And we hope you will follow us
like, subscribe, do all the social media things.
And join us again.
About
Bye.
you. And I love this land. Oh, it takes my breath away. From the Palo Duro to the Gulf Coast plain. From the heart of the hill country to the piney wood shade. I love this land. It takes my breath away.